Hey, this is Catherine Gladder of Gladder to Hear That. Today I'm going to talk about going with the flow versus making plans. So I realized on my first trip to Europe that although I enjoyed living in the moment to a large extent, I realized I wish I had planned more. Hear me out. So although it's a unique example, it's a very memorable one for me and definitely taught me the lesson in a not overly harsh way. You see, although the instructor of my study abroad trip had planned almost every part of our trip out, I still felt that I wish I had researched more before my trip. From what I wanted to see on my own, to what was safe for me to see alone, to restaurants that were best for my budget, time, and interest. Although I enjoyed almost every restaurant I went to, there were many points of research I could have done. What was open and what was a tourist trap and what wasn't well outside my price range and what was maybe famous. Now, all that said, I could have planned everything and still decided to go walking to wherever I thought looked intriguing at the moment, even if I had done this research as I intended to do on the actual trip. My theory now is to overplan a little so that I have the option to use the plans, but also deciding that I can do what I want to a large extent on trips if I want, and take different and perhaps better plans if the opportunity presents itself. So what does that mean in everyday life? It means that you can, and in many cases, should plan things so that you're prepared, but also to be ready to ditch those plans if appropriate. Now, that said, don't cancel your restaurant reservations if it's less than an hour away, but if you're hungry midday and you and your friends see a spot for lunch that you didn't know about and looks interesting, it may be a good option to substitute. It means having a list of options ready to go in your notes app more than writing down a specific restaurant in your calendar for each night you need a place. It's about the list, again, more than like, we're going here this night. An example of this being a great practice came up just before the great lockdown of 2020, as I like to call it. I was going with the youth group I work with on an overnight retreat. The pastor and I had planned to get lunch at a fast food place on our way home. We lucked out and got extra lunches from the conference. So instead, we stopped at Krispy Kreme, a place we can't get handy where we live. We were definitely excited, and everyone on that trip loved the treat. It made for far more memorable stop and an end to the trip because they all had donuts to eat on the way home. Great solution for hungry high schoolers. That said, I'm glad we had those lunch plans anyway, in case we needed to get something more substantial than donuts. The lesson on this retreat, we now plan on Krispy Kreme. But if something like Nando's randomly popped up in the Midwest, I'd probably request to try that next. The world also plans ahead enough. Think about how many events are scheduled on Facebook, at least before the Great Lockdown, and how far restaurants plan their menus or stores plan their sales. You could probably take some cues and adapt that to your own life, while also being ready to let go and go with the flow. Again, it's more about having options and not feeling stranded in a lot of cases. This is similar to the reason I usually overpack for trips, even overnights to my parents. I'd rather have more because weather is hard to predict, and I'm really sensitive to temperature changes. I dislike being cold far more, though, to be honest. But by over-planning, I can avoid being miserably cold in many cases. I can bring an extra layer, even if it sits in my car or my hotel room. I can bring a swimsuit, and if there's a surprise pool at the hotel or a surprise empty afternoon on a trip, or maybe otherwise, and I find myself by a beach, I can take advantage of that. You never know. You might be asking yourself, okay, how do I plan ahead? I've never really done that before, or maybe you just haven't been in charge of it. First things first, Google Map it. Are you in your hometown and have your car to go meet your friend for brunch? Or do you need to know where you'll find breakfast each morning by your hotel while you're on the other side of the country? Do you need a ride share or can you scooter? Are those things even available where you're going? Another benefit to planning is budgeting. If all your friends want to go to the fancy place around the corner from your conference for dinner and you have no alternative in mind, it could be harder to make a convincing argument for walking further. But if you already know a place, when the specials are, and what the best item in the menu is, and maybe even like reviews or something, you make a far more compelling argument. That said, you may have to find a compromise anyway, but planning allows for more compromise, I would argue. Or if you're just by yourself or in charge of an itinerary item, by researching beforehand, you may find out that the museum or theater tickets you want are cheaper on specific dates or specific times, and you can totally fit it into your schedule. But you may not have known that had you walked up to the box office or the hostess stand at 6 o'clock that evening. Planning ahead isn't just about the one-offs, though. One event or trip that may come up in life, it's about planning for your lifestyle. Saving money, more money than you think you need if you can. Buying a car that is practical but that will last you a couple of years if you can. Buying clothes that will be stylish for years even if they aren't perfectly trendy. Plan meals with more great leftovers if you can to avoid eating out at work. But on the other hand, if your coworkers suggest lunch out, you could leave that meal for tomorrow potentially. But you still have it in the fridge if they don't, and you're not going out to eat by yourself. Why? Maybe buy used equipment for your office on the cheap. Then you can figure out which big ticket item is most important, i.e., should you have a fancy external monitor or is a top-of-the-line mouse and keyboard more important? What about your home could you find? A fancy dishes on clearance after Christmas, or are you going to put them on a registry where people will probably end up paying full price for them? There's some ideas for another day, obviously, but I want to at least address how this concept fits in with the everyday and life in general. Don't go overboard with all of this either. I wouldn't suggest planning down to the hour or to the very end of your budget or buying every ticket ahead of time, but more to know that it's available, when, and what the weather could do. Another big thing I want to touch on is what I mean by canceling plans. Don't cancel plans with a family member or friend last minute, or in general, in my opinion, unless you absolutely have to. And even then, I would offer a rain check and a semi-specific time, like a Saturday next month instead of in the future, or whatever's applicable. Another thing is you consider changing plans. Maybe one of you couldn't get the car to start this morning, so instead the other one picks up to-go items and you enjoy eating at the other's home. Or you could use the table games sitting in your closet. Or maybe you realize your budget is down to the wire, so you offer to cook. It all depends on your options. But if you do actually have to cancel, be prepared. I would encourage you at least to be prepared to offer an explanation if it makes the other person feel better. Are you quitting a friendship because you realize you don't have time? Or did you just make a commitment for work and you don't have the headspace to plan ahead right now? Big difference. This is more about the places you can make plans for, far more than the people you're with. It's about being mindful, not meticulous in every case. Knowing that you'll probably have just as much fun with whomever you're with, whether or not you picked the activities or restaurants you researched before. So stop asking if I'm a planner or a go-with-the-flow kind of person. That's more talking to every survey online about strengths finders and things. I can't remember which one I read that in. But the answer is both, and now you know why and how. So plan to have your plans changed, but still plan. You won't feel as flustered to ensure you can find a place for dinner every night on vacation, but you can also know that there will always be more options. It's about balance. Thanks so much for listening today to the Gladder to Hear That podcast. Follow or subscribe on whatever platform is your favorite. Thanks. Bye.